Hello and welcome to this instructional video which is based on the Selective High School Placement Test reading question paper of 2022. There are 30 multiple choice questions in this paper, and obviously for each one of those questions there is only one correct answer. So we will go through each of the texts in the test today and also the answers, looking closely at the evidence and the strategies that we can use to make sure that we find the correct answer for those questions. Let's begin by looking at text A and B and then the first 8 questions which are about those two texts and a comparison and contrast. Now, at the top of the test we have an instruction. It's important to read everything. So read the two extracts on the theme of dogs and their relationship with humans and then answer the questions. So this is very helpful because it gives us a good idea of what type of information we should focus on. So the theme of dogs and the relationship with humans. The first extract is from a novel, The Call of the Wild, written by Jack London, and it's from 1903. So this information here gives us some context, and we can anticipate what type of language or settings we might expect to find in this text. Also, we have an italicized introductory sentence here. Buck the dog enjoys his new freedom after being rescued by John Thornton, a new kind of master, having pulled a sled for thousands of miles. Again, this information is critical, so it's important to read everything because we have the introduction of our main characters, Buck and John Thornton. We can assume that he is a man and Buck is obviously the dog. A new kind of master is relevant because it foreshadows the type of perhaps positive relationship we might see between them, and we have some context of the plot, what has happened prior, and that is that they have been pulling a sled for thousands of miles. Okay, let's read the text and then take a close look at the questions, beginning here. Lying by the river bank, through the long spring days, watching the running water, listening to the songs of birds and the hum of nature, Buck slowly won back his strength. It must be confessed that Buck waxed lazy as his wounds healed. His muscles swelled out and the flesh came back to cover his bones. For that matter, they were all loafing, Buck, John Thornton and Skeet, waiting for the raft to come that was to carry them down to Dawson. Skeet was a little Irish setter who early made friends with Buck, who, in a dying condition, was unable to resent her first advances. She had the doctor trait which some dogs possess, washing and cleansing Buck's wounds. Regularly, each morning after he had finished his breakfast, she performed her self-appointed task, till he came to look for her ministrations as much as he did for Thornton's. Second paragraph here. To Buck's surprise, Skeet manifested no jealousy towards him. She seemed to share all the kindliness and largeness of John Thornton. As Buck grew stronger, she enticed him into all sorts of ridiculous games, in which Thornton himself could not forbear to join. And in this fashion, Buck romped through his convalescence and into a new existence. Next paragraph. Thornton was the ideal master. He never forgot a kindly greeting or cheering word, and to sit down for a long talk with them was as much his delight as theirs. He had a way of taking Buck's head roughly between his hands and resting his own head upon Buck's, and while calling him names that to Buck were love names. Buck knew no greater joy than that rough embrace and the sound of murmured oaths. With his mouth laughing, his eyes eloquent, his throat vibrant with unuttered sounds, John Thornton would reverently exclaim, "God, you can all but speak." Buck had a trick of love expression that was akin to hurt. He would often seize Thornton's hand in his mouth and close so fiercely that the flesh bore impress of his teeth for some time afterwards. And as Buck understood the oaths to be love words, so the man understood his feigned bite for a caress. For the most part, however, Buck's love was expressed in adoration. While he went wild with happiness when John Thornton touched him or spoke to him, he did not seek these tokens. Unlike Skeet, who was wont to shove her nose under Thornton's hand and nudge till petted, Buck was content to adore at a distance. He would lie by the hour, eager, alert at Thornton's feet, looking up into his face, studying it, following with keenest interest each fleeting expression, every movement or change of feature. For a long time after his rescue, Buck did not like Thornton to get out of his sight. From the moment he left the tent to when he entered it again, Buck would follow at his heels. His transient masters, since he had come to the Northland, had bred in him a fear that no master could be permanent. Even in the night in his dreams, he was haunted by this fear. Okay, so we have the first extract there, which is text A, and now text B. It is from The Effect of Pets on Humans, and it's written by Marie Carter in 2016, so a much more modern text and with a different purpose and target audience. So let's read through this one, beginning here. Anyone who has ever owned a pet knows that they have the capacity for the kind of unconditional love that is seen otherwise only between a human and its offspring. The gentle nudge of a wet nose or a lick on the hand comes unbidden when we're upset or feeling down. The bounding dash to the door to greet us is also a demonstrable sign of the strength of the human-canine bond in particular. Second paragraph. Dogs can be trained to recognize words through commands. Scientists agree that they can't actually understand the words. What they hear is the emotion of the voice. Okay, remember we're focusing on the relationship between dogs and humans, so we can look for examples of that as we're reading. Studies have also shown that looking a dog in the eyes can boost levels of oxytocin, a hormone involved in social bonding. Interesting. In both the person and the dog. From the dog's perspective, it's not just cupboard love triggered by a hungry belly. There is in fact nothing artificial that could ever replace the sheer authenticity of feeling. Dogs are the only species that, like a human child, will run to their human when frightened, anxious, or just pleased to see them. Next paragraph. They are also the only animal aside from other humans that actively seek out eye contact with people and truly want to be with us. Cats too come to us when we're down and will show that they are pleased to see us with a lick on the hand or a gentle purr to express their own feelings of contentment. This is interesting information about the cats, but what I've noticed is it may be a little decoy because the theme, as introduced to us at the beginning of the test, said that it would be about the relationship between dogs and humans. So that's just something to keep in mind. Pets give people so much in terms of love and emotional support. Simply stroking a dog, for example, can lead to lower blood pressure and can combat stress. The feelings are reciprocated, as our touch can have therapeutic effects for our pets, particularly if they are feeling out of sorts. Let's take a moment to talk about the different types of multiple choice questions that we find in reading comprehension tests like this. So for each questions 1 to 8, you need to choose the option A, B, C, or D, which you think best answers the question. Now it's important to note that there are different types of multiple choice questions. So some common ones we see are, for example, odd one out or best answer options. So the odd one out means that the question provides several options to you, and then you're asked which option does not match or doesn't seem to fit with the others, and then you can deduce down to the right answer. The other common style we see is the best answer. These type of questions can be most challenging because they often include more than one answer that might seem correct at first. However, the correct answer is the one that is the most truest or the most correct or the best answer for that option. So just keep that in mind as we go through today's questions and answers. The first question is about theme. What theme is dealt with in both extracts? Okay, so our options are A, the owner sensing that the dog is ill at ease. Keyword here, ill at ease. Option B, the mutual affection between dog and human. Option C, the jealousy, keyword jealousy, that dogs have for each other or other pets. And option D, the dog is trying to warn its owner about something. So that's the key phrase there, warning the owner about something. Now, at first glance, option B seems to be the most correct, but of course we need to go and check the evidence to make sure that that is the right answer. So we look at option A first. The owner is sensing that the dog is ill at ease. What evidence do we have for that? Well, Buck is actually predominantly at ease in his environment, and option B really only refers generally to pets feeling a little bit out of sorts. So we can probably rule out option A because it is not actually accurate in the sense of extract A. Option C, jealousy, is also incorrect. There is only a very general reference in extract A to jealousy and none in extract B. There's no evidence of dogs trying to warn their owners about something, which is the key terms there in D. So therefore, it's incorrect. And that brings us back to B again. Is there evidence that both texts deal with the theme of mutual affection between dogs and humans? Yes, there is. In text A, we see lots of positive emotional language that illustrates this. So terms like the ideal master. Here is the excerpt about there being no jealousy. He says, the ideal master, words like cheering, love games, etc., love expression, love words, again, and these whole paragraphs here are about that mutual respect and mutual affection between Thornton and Buck. In extract B, the topic sentence is evidence in itself. Anyone who has ever owned a pet knows they have the capacity for a kind of unconditional love that's otherwise only seen between humans and their offspring. And down here in the final paragraph, it refers to the fact that the feelings of love and support are reciprocated. Here it is. Reciprocated, which means given back and forth or mutual between one another. So the best answer there is B, and really clear evidence to prove it. All right, let's take a look now at question number 2. Keywords. What idea about dog behavior is present in text B and also in text A? So again, we're looking through both texts. Our options are A, the way a dog communicates its support in a physical way. B, the pleasure of a dog at its owner's return. Keywords. C, the beneficial effect of a dog on its owner's health. Keyword there is health as well. And D, the way a dog may seek its owner's protection. Okay, so what evidence have we got? Well, whilst both texts do touch on the idea of pleasure or an enjoyment between humans and dogs, B is actually technically incorrect because Buck never leaves John Thornton's heels. The quote is actually, Buck did not let Thornton out of his sight. Question 2. What idea about dog behavior is present in both text B and also in text A? So our answer options: A, the way a dog communicates its support in a physical way. The key word there, physical. B, the pleasure of a dog on its owner's return. C, the beneficial effect of a dog on its owner's health. Or D, the way a dog may seek its owner's protection. Okay, so we need to find evidence to support or not these answer options. I'm just going to start with option B and talk about that. So whilst both texts do explore the idea of pleasure or affection, option B is technically incorrect, and that's evidenced by this quote: the fact that Buck did not like to let Thornton out of his sight. So B can't be correct because the owner never actually left. Buck wouldn't let him out of his sight, and therefore there's no return to speak of. Option C, the beneficial effect of a dog on its owner's health. So that is covered in extract B, but it's not really covered in extract A. So they talk about therapeutic effects for pets, particularly if they're feeling out of sorts, and the fact that that therapeutic effect goes both ways. But it's only discussed in extract B, so we can knock that option out as it does not appear in both texts. Option D, the way a dog may seek its owner's protection. So this is a really general statement, and the idea of dogs seeking their owner's protection is not clearly discussed or detailed in either extract A or B, so we can confidently knock that one out, which brings us back to A, the way a dog communicates its support in a physical way. Do we have evidence of that? Yes, we do. Let's have a look at this paragraph here, for example. Buck had a trick of love expression that was akin to hurt. He would often seize Thornton's hand in his mouth, so this is the physical expression, and close so fiercely that the flesh bore an impress of his teeth for some time afterwards. And as Buck understood the oaths to be love words, so the man understood this feigned or pretend bite for a caress, which has connotations of love and affection. Okay, so there's our evidence from extract A. What about extract B? That comes here in the first paragraph, the physical affection. The gentle nudge of a wet nose or a lick on the hand comes unbidden when we're upset or feeling down. The bounding dash to the door, so that's another example of physical affection. To greet us is also a demonstrable, which means to demonstrate, sign of the strength of the human canine bond in particular. Okay, so based on all that evidence, we can confidently say that option A here is the best answer. Question 3. What idea about communication is present in both extracts? A. Humans sometimes call dogs names that they regret. B. Dogs recognize the feeling behind their owner's words. C. Dogs occasionally find it hard to hide their aggressive instincts. Or option D. Humans are amazed at how many orders a dog can follow. So there's no evidence for A or C in either extract. They don't refer to the idea of regret or aggressive instincts. So we can knock those out, but of course we go on to check the evidence for the other answers still. Option D has some truth to it. I suppose it's because the tone of the text portrays that humans are indeed amazed by dogs, but not in the sense of how many orders they can follow. So that's a detail there that's not included. Therefore, we can knock out D as well, which leaves us with option B. Dogs recognize the feeling behind their owner's words, and there is evidence in both texts to support this. So we'll start with text A and look at Buck. So it says here, Buck knew no greater joy than the rough embrace and the sound of murmured oaths. Okay, so that's the sound we're talking about. That he's able to interpret love through that rough embrace. He also states that Buck understood the oaths to be love words, and so the man understood his feigned bite for a caress. So that first part there tells us that dogs recognize the feelings behind their owner's words. And in extract B, it clearly states that dogs can be trained to recognize words through commands. Scientists agree that they can't actually understand the words. What they hear is the emotion of the voice. Okay, so there's the second piece of evidence to show that dogs recognize feelings behind their owner's words, and that clearly gives us option B as the right answer. Question 4, the phrase "for that matter" in text A is used to A, introduce a contrast, B, intensify a positive description, C, widen out a criticism, or D, give a reason for a particular behavior. So if we know the idiom "for that matter," it's used to say that a second thing or an upcoming piece of information is just as important or true as the first one. So hence, that pushes us straight away to look at this option to widen out or to broaden a criticism. It's not option A because there's no contrast being drawn. Let's take a look at the text to prove it. The sentence starts here. "For that matter, they were all loafing, Buck, John, Thornton and Skeet, waiting for the raft to come that was to carry them down to Dawson." Okay, so that's a bit of plot and it's an explanation. We're not getting a contrast, so we can probably knock out A. Option B is also incorrect because the description of them is actually not really positive in nature. In fact, it's more critical. The words that we're looking for there for evidence is loafing. So loafing means to spend one's time in a really aimless or idle way. And prior to that, it also describes Buck as lazy. So if we look in the context of the paragraph, we can understand that this is not a positive description per se, so it's probably not B either. C, yes, we've said, is most likely, but let's check D. Does it give a reason for a particular behavior? No, the sentence is not providing any reasoning. So in the context of these sentences then, we can confidently say that it is C, to widen out a criticism. Question number 5 asks, in text A, what are we told about Buck and the female dog Skeet? So our options are A, was it that Skeet was initially wary of approaching Buck? B, that Buck was initially irritated by Skeet? C, that Buck eventually appreciated Skeet's affection? Or D, that Skeet eventually tired of Buck? So we can go back to the text and have a look at the evidence. It comes from this passage here, of course, where we're introduced to Skeet. So option A is incorrect because Skeet was actually never wary of Buck, and in fact she actually made early friends with him. So that one is incorrect. Option B, which is Buck was initially irritated by Skeet, that one might be somewhat correct because it does say that he was unable to resent her first advances. So that sentence, resent, kind of gives us a nudge that maybe he was irritated. However, it's really not clear because he was in a dying condition or a dying state. So we don't know how he would have felt. And that answer really relies too much, therefore, on assumption. Option D, which is that she eventually tired of Buck. That one is also inaccurate because there's no evidence that Skeet tired of Buck, and actually all of the evidence says that she was really affectionate to him all the time. So therefore C is our best answer, and all the evidence comes here. The reader can infer that this word, ministrations, refers to affection and care shown by Skeet. So early in the passage, it states here that in his weakened state, he was unable to resent or object her affections, but then descriptions of her behaviour, which includes the comparison to the doctor's trait, under this line, the doctor's trait, washing and cleansing Buck's wounds, that illustrates the affection some more. And the final sentence shows that Buck eventually did appreciate this in the same way that he came to appreciate Thornton's affections. So regularly each morning after he'd finished breakfast, she performed what she or what the author, refers to as the self-appointed task, until he came to look at her ministrations as much as he did for Thornton's. So there we go, plenty of evidence to confidently tell us that option C is the best answer there. Question 6. In comparison with Skeets, the expression of Buck's love for Thornton was A, more impulsive, B, less complicated, C, more erratic, or D, less needy. So let's take a look at the section of the text that this is in reference to, and it comes from this paragraph here. For the most part, however, Buck's love was expressed in adoration. While he went wild with happiness when Thornton touched or spoke to him, he did not seek these tokens. Unlike Skeet, there's the comparison, who was wont to shove her nose under Thornton's hand and nudge till petted, Buck was content to adore at a distance. Okay, so we have some good evidence there to show that it is the expression of Buck's love was less needy, but we'll talk through the other options. So option A and C are inaccurate because, well, Buck was not impulsive or erratic. So both of those descriptions don't really match the characterization that we've seen of him, which is more thoughtful and self-aware. Option B is also not accurate because I don't think we could consider his behavior to be especially complicated. And if anything, Buck's behaviour would have been more complicated than Skeet's. So therefore, D is our best option, and the evidence from the passage, describes Skeet as being more needy than Buck, and that's through her requiring more petting and shoving her nose under Thornton's hand until she was petted by him. And it tells us, if we still not sure, very clearly that Buck did not seek those tokens. He didn't go out looking for them. Rather, he was happy to adore at a distance. So we can be confident that the best answer there is D. Question 7. According to the last paragraph, Buck was haunted by the thought that A, his captors would return to claim him, B, he might never see the wild again, C, he would lose his way in this new land, or D, his present owner would disappear from his life. So let's go back to the text and see what Jack London has written for us in this paragraph. For a long time after his rescue, so this word here automatically indicates to some sort of past traumatic experience, Buck did not like Thornton out of his sight. From the moment he left the tent to when he entered it again, Buck would follow at his heels. Okay, so this is all showing us that he has anxiety around his present owner Thornton leaving. His transient masters, since he had come to the Northland, had bred in him a fear that no master could be permanent. And even at night, in his dreams, he was haunted by this fear. So there's the direct reference that he was haunted by which fear? The fear of this. Transient master means somebody who's not permanent, that they might leave, and that they had bred in him a fear about this. So it's pretty obvious that it is D, but let's take a look at evidence just to ensure we are right. There's no evidence really actually for A, B, or C. But there is plenty of evidence for D, as we've just seen in the extract. The fact, for example, that he did not let Thornton out of his sight. The text suggests that he has a real fear of abandonment, which links to this idea of disappearance, and that had been bred into him, and a fear, that the transient masters would leave him or disappear from his life. So plenty of evidence there that D is the correct answer. Question 8. What does the writer of text B say about the stare that a dog gives its owner? That A, it is entirely genuine and earnest. B, it is something that parents will understand. C, it is motivated by a desire for food. Or D, it is shared in the animal kingdom only by cats. Now, all four of these answers have some reference in the text. So it's not that one is obviously incorrect, and we need to, therefore, really focus on the detail here about the stare the stare that the dog gives. Where does that come in the text? It's in this paragraph. So studies have shown that looking a dog in the eyes can boost levels of oxytocin, the hormone involved in social bonding, in both the person and the dog. From the dog's perspective, it is not just cupboard love, which means that they are behaving in a certain way because you're feeding them food, out of hunger. They will be trained like that. There is, in fact, nothing artificial that could ever replace the sheer authenticity of feeling. Okay, so that's our key phrase, sheer authenticity of feeling. Dogs are the only species that, like a human child, will run to their human when frightened, anxious, or just pleased to see them. There is some reference to the cats down here, cats do come to us when they are pleased to see us, but we're focused on this idea of dogs being the only other animal that actively seek out eye contact, because again, we're coming back to the word from the question, which is specifically about staring. So where to from here? Well, option A does seem to be the most correct, but let's look at the other options. C, they are motivated only by a desire for food. No, we can knock that out because it says clearly in the text explicitly that it is not just what they refer to as cupboard love. Option D might be somewhat correct, which we mentioned because there is that reference to cats, but it's not to do with the stare, and that's really key in this question. Option B, it's something that parents will understand. There is a vague reference to offspring, human offspring in that first paragraph, but it's definitely not strong enough to be enough support for that question, which leaves us, of course, with option A, that it is entirely genuine and earnest, and we do have synonymous words in the text that match with genuine and earnest, and they are these sentence here, sheer authenticity and nothing artificial. Okay, so that answer is clearly A, that it is entirely genuine and earnest. This section is comprehension questions based on the poem From the Wave by Tom Gunn. So we'll read through the text first of all to get an idea. We'll skim and scan through that quite quickly, and then we'll go through each one of these questions in more detail. So let's read stanza number 1, starting here. It mounts at sea a concave wall down-ribbed with shine, and pushes forward, building tall its steep incline. Then, from their hiding rise to sight, black shapes on boards bearing, before the fringe of white it mottles towards. Their pale feet curl, their poise, their weight. With learned skill, it is the wave they imitate, keeps them so still. The marbling bodies have become half wave, half men, grafted, it seems, by feet of foam some seconds. Then, late as they can, they slice the face in timed procession. Balance is triumph in this place, triumph procession. The mindless heave of which they rode a fluid shelf breaks as they leave it, falls and, slowed, loses itself. Clear, the sheathed bodies, slick as seals, loosen and tingle, and by the board the barefoot feels the suck of shingle. They paddle in the shadows still, to splash each other, then all swim out to wait until the right waves gather. Okay, so that's a really beautiful but highly descriptive poem about surfers riding the wave. So let's take a look at our first question, number 9. And it is, the idea in the title of the poem, From the Wave, is developed by the description of what? The growing size of the wave, the surfer's first appearance, or the way the wave is advancing, or is it the surfer's distance actually from the shore? So I think we need to go back to the right verse to see where or who or what actually comes from the wave. And our instinct tells us that it is the surfers that actually appear from the wave. So this passage here, from their hiding rise to sight, black shapes on boards bearing before the fringe of white. So the rise to sight really is the reference to them appearing from the wave. So option A and D, if we look at them, are basically inaccurate because we're not getting reference in the title from the wave about the size of the wave or in fact about the distance that they are from the shore. So it's pretty clear that the title from the wave, I'll just write that here so we don't have to keep going backwards and forwards, is not about A or D. Okay, what about option C? The way the wave is advancing. Well, that's not really accurate either. Of course, the poem is describing the wave's movement, but it's not really referring to this idea that something has come from the wave. And what does come from the wave in this poem is the appearance of the surfers that figuratively come from the wave. We see it in stanza 2 with that reference to the black shapes in the water. From their hiding rise to sight. And I think that we can say the poet, is not just satisfied to assert that the surfers imitate the wave. He wants to show you. And that comes from this line here, the poise of their weight. We're moving through into the third verse there. And the curl of the feet. There's other references to half wave, half men, grafted. So this is personification that really brings the surfers together with the wave, and therefore coming back to this term from the wave, the best answer we can say is that the idea of that title is coming from the surfer's first appearance from the wave. Question number 10. In the poem, the description of the surfers actually shifts. So is it from a sense of collaboration to one of self-reliance? B, a feeling of apprehension to one of achievement? C, an impression of immobility to one of rapid movement? Or D, a state of relaxed indifference to one of active participation? Okay, well, there's just no evidence to suggest that there's a sense of collaboration or self-reliance, so pretty sure it's not A, nor is there any reference to the suggestion of them being apprehensive, so nervous or scared to ride the wave. Relaxed indifference as well doesn't suit. We don't have any reference to them being indifferent, which would mean that they just don't really care one way or another. So in that sense, D is also inaccurate. C, an impression of immobility to one of rapid movement. Yes, there's evidence to confirm this because the impression of immobility is created by those terms poised and still, and then that's contrasted with the impression of rapid movement, and that's created by the verse that says they slice down the face in timed procession. So we move here, the shift is from the poised and the stillness here, and then it moves quickly, changing here. They slice the face late as they can in timed procession. So for that answer, we can be confident that it is C, basically because A, B, and C all have some element of inaccuracy, or they're just not right, but also there's pretty clear evidence that C is the most correct or the best answer there. Question 11 asks us the word grafted in the fourth verse. What does it suggest? It suggests that the surfers are acting in unison, they are now part of the wave, they're struggling with their boards, or they're at the wave's highest point. If we know the word grafted, this is an easy question because we know to graft something means to become part of it, or to become part, to be inserted or transplanted as a graft, right? And there's no reference to them struggling, so C is out. There's no reference in the fourth verse to the wave's highest point, so D is out. Unison, yes, there is some correctness to the word unison based on grafted, but it's definitely not the most accurate once we consider B being part of the wave, and the reference to them being half men, half wave, half men, confirms that really inextricable and close connection between the two. There it is. Half wave, half men, grafted, it seems. Okay, question 12. Unlike the rest of the poem, in the last verse, the surfers are shown to be surprisingly cautious. Do they appear unconcerned with looking impressive? Are they described as behaving just like ordinary people? Or D, seem to be sensing a big opportunity? So of course we need to go back to the last verse and have a look at the description. They paddle in the shadows still, to splash each other, then all swim out to wait until the right waves gather. So this verse is much slower and it's reflective after the climactic point of them surfing down the face of the wave. So let's have a look at what evidence we can build on here. Unlike the rest of the poem, the last verse, what are they doing? Are they showing to be surprisingly cautious? I would say no. There's no evidence there of them being cautious. Do they appear unconcerned with looking impressive? Not really. This is off. The stanza is not about how they feel they appear to anyone. Are they being described as behaving as ordinary people? Yes. I think the splashing in the water, just paddling in the shallows still and playing with each other, this gives the suggestion that they're behaving just like ordinary people. D, that they seem to be sensing a big opportunity. Not really. There is this half reference to them waiting until the right waves gather again. So there's a little bit of, I suppose, inference that there might be something coming, but it's not accurate in the sense of them expecting a big opportunity. So C is the most correct answer here for question 12. 13, in which verse does the climax of the poem actually occur? Okay, so our options are, is it verse 5, which begins late as they can, verse 6, the mindless heave, verse 7, clear, the sheathed bodies, or verse 8, beginning that they paddle in the shadows. So here we've got to look really closely at not only the language but also the punctuation and the way that the poem's been formatted, the way that the verses have been separated. We're looking really at enjambment as well. So at the end of verse 4, which is here, then you might notice that that is the only final line of any of the verses that doesn't end with a full stop. It actually has a comma. Okay, so that's really critical because the comma moves over the boundary of the stanza and then it sets up some change or shift in movement here, which actually introduces the climax that does appear in verse 5. So late as they can, they slice down the face in time procession, balance this triumph in this place. All the way up to here in the poem, we have leading action to them surfing down the wave, and afterwards there's a falling action as well where they are relaxed after they have ridden the wave. So that really squarely places this stanza or verse as the climactic verse in the poem. Everything else is really building up to that moment or reflecting and the aftermath of that moment. So that leaves us with 13. Best option is A, verse beginning with late as they can. Question number 14 asks us, what is the main idea developed in this poem? Is it that the effort involved, or that there is effort involved in developing a physical skill? Is it a sense of letdown after a major achievement? Is it that achievements are possible when people work together? Or is it the mastery of humans over the power of nature? Now, our instinct goes here to D because, the poem really does explore that idea about the wonderful relationship that there is between humans and nature. So the poem doesn't focus on effort, the effort that's involved in developing a physical skill, so we can confidently knock out A. There's no reference to any type of letdown, not in this sense. A letdown in this sense refers to being disappointed, and it's not about that. The down or the falling action is more about a relief and a period of reflection after. It's not a letdown in the sense that this suggests a disappointment. Surfing is an individual pursuit, so whilst there's many surfers there, it's really just about each individual. So we probably couldn't say that it's about people working together, achievements being possible when people work together. So we could knock out C. D, is it about that? Yes, it is the most correct, because this poem is about the celebration of the ease and the ability and the proficiency of human movement through that really evocative imagery of the surfers just gracefully riding down the growing wave as it gathers itself towards the shore. So yes, D is our best answer there. This part of the reading comprehension test is called matching paragraph summarization. The instructions are to read the text below, which consists of 6 paragraphs, and questions 15 to 20 are based on those paragraphs. For questions 15 to 20, you are to choose an option A through to G which best summarizes each paragraph. There is one extra option which you do not need to use. So summarization is of course the process of creating a summary that contains the most important information from each one of those paragraphs in order to be best prepared for reading, skimming, scanning, and looking for detail in each one of these paragraphs. It's best to read our options for the summaries first. We'll start with A, Mars entering 20th century popular culture. I'll just highlight keywords. B, how new technology facilitated the earliest scientific observations of Mars. C, recent evidence for the presence of water on Mars. D, the idea that there are different perceptions of the planet Mars. E, the reason why Mars began to be portrayed more realistically in movies and in books. F, the assumption about a geographical feature on Mars that was inaccurate. And G, the significance of Mars to earlier human societies. The title of the text is Our Fascination with Mars. Let's read through the 6 paragraphs before anything else. Obviously, reading that out loud takes longer than it would if you were silent reading, but for the purpose of this video, I think it's important that we go through each one of the paragraphs. And I have pre-highlighted some of the key ideas and main words and phrases along the way that will help us to match with the summaries afterwards. So let's begin here with our first paragraph and what would be question 15. Mars, the fourth most distant planet from the Sun in our solar system, is actually more than one place. There's the Mars that scientists study through telescopes and with robotic satellites and rovers, the destination in our solar system that astronauts will someday visit and colonize. There are also other versions of Mars which have come from our imagination throughout the course of history. Next paragraph. Mars is one of 5 planets which are visible to the unaided eye. Its reddish-orange hue inspired some civilizations in the past to imagine it as a symbol of war and violence. The ancient Mesopotamians linked Mars to Nergal, a god who was the symbol of hunting and sometimes led other gods into battle. In their city, Nineveh, they erected the Nergal Gate to show their reverence. The ancient Greeks associated the red planet with Ares, a warrior god who was the son of Zeus and his wife Hera. In Roman mythologies, Ares became the war god Mars, who was so important to them that they dedicated March, the first month in their calendar year, to him. Next paragraph, attached to question 17. Eventually, people started shifting from thinking of Mars as a mystical place to seeing it as a planet that was somewhat like their own. The development of telescopes in the 1600s enabled humans to see Mars and some of the details of its surface clearly for the first time. In 1659, the Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens drew one of the first accurate maps of the red planet and figured out that it rotated in the same way that Earth did. 18. In 1877, the Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli observed lines in the planet's equatorial region, a phenomenon that was also noted by the American astronomer Percival Lowell. The term that Schiaparelli used, canali, sounded a lot like the English word canal, and that led to some mistakenly think that the red planet had waterways built by an alien civilization. 19. Even after other scientists concluded that Mars' surface was probably not capable of supporting life, the idea of life on Mars fascinated people's imaginations. Writers of the new genre of science fiction and fantasy began to write about it in their stories. British author H.G. Wells' pioneering novel The War of the Worlds depicted Mars as a dying planet whose technologically advanced civilization wanted to conquer Earth. It caused a sensation when adapted for a radio broadcast in 1938, The Martian Chronicles. Ray Bradbury's 1950 collection of stories presented a planet filled with empty cities from a fallen civilization. For Hollywood filmmakers, Mars also became a convenient setting for movies full of malevolent Martians and monsters, such as the 1960 film The Angry Red Planet. There was even a television sitcom, My Favorite Martian, which featured a sarcastic secret visitor from Mars who pretended to be human. Final paragraph attached to question 20. All of these sci-fi fantasies of Mars were dashed by the close-up images transmitted by the Mariner 4 unmanned space probe in 1964, which revealed it to be a cratered moon-like planet lacking in seas or vegetation. Those and later scientific discoveries about Mars seem to have influenced writers and filmmakers to change their depictions of the red planet, not as home to an alien civilization, but a distant world that humans will someday visit and colonize. In more recent movies, such as the 1990s Total Recall and The Martian in 2015, Mars is depicted as a rugged, barren, dry planet with a thin atmosphere where space colonists have to live in well-protected bases and wear spacesuits to survive. Okay, so those are our paragraphs. Now, let's go and look at what the best answer for each one of those is in terms of a summary. Remembering that's what we're doing here, we're finding the best summary for each paragraph. Beginning with question 15, the correct answer from our options is option D. The idea that there are different perceptions of the planet Mars. That's the best summary for this paragraph, and it comes from the evidence we find here. Firstly, there is the Mars that scientists study through telescopes, and there are also other versions of Mars which have come into our imagination. So the idea that there are different perceptions is introduced in that paragraph. Therefore, that is the best answer. On to 16. Our best summary statement is option G. the significance of Mars to early human societies. Now, there's multiple pieces of evidence that point to the significance of Mars to those societies. Some of them are highlighted here. For example, the ancient Mesopotamians, the ancient Greeks, and Roman mythology. So there's some clear links there to show that is the best summary statement. Question 17, we match the summary statement B, which is how new technology has facilitated the earliest scientific observations of Mars. And our evidence is highlighted here. So people started shifting. We've got a reference to the past there of how Mars was perceived, but that changed, and here is the evidence. The development of telescopes in the 1600s, so that's our earliest scientific observations, enabled humans to see Mars for the first time. There's the key word, the first time there. Okay, paragraph 18, the correct summary is option F, an assumption about a geographical feature on Mars that was actually inaccurate. And that is, of course, referring to the canali, or mix-up between that and the English word canal. And in the last sentence here, the evidence is some people mistakenly thought that the red planet had waterways built by an alien civilization. Okay, so the canal is the geographical reference or feature of Mars there that one is referring to. 19, our best and correct answer comes from summary statement A. Mars entering 20th century popular culture. Now there's lots of references here to the 20th century, which is between 1900 and 2000. So that alone, we can find several dates throughout that point to that time period. But then there's also the specific reference to films and movies and the radio broadcast, etc. So that is the popular culture references. Our final paragraph 20, the correct answer is E. So the best summary statement is this one. The reason why Mars began to be portrayed more realistically in movies and books, and the reasons given for that statement, is because of the close-up images that were transmitted back by the Mariner 4 unmanned space probe in 1964. So the result of that was that it revealed a different perspective of Mars than what had previously been had, and it was those later scientific discoveries that had influenced filmmakers to change their depictions of the red planet. So yeah, essentially it was the images that were sent back, and that's what led to Mars being portrayed in more realistic ways in books and movies. And there's a couple of those mentioned, names, titles, years, throughout the rest of that paragraph as evidence as well. Now the final summary statement that was not used, this one, C, recent evidence for the presence of water on Mars. There was no paragraph that discussed that as the main idea, so we can be confident that C, as our leftover summary statement, is indeed correct. Extract A. It took less than 50 seconds, 49.11 seconds to be exact, for Kathy Freeman to run into immortality. 49.11 seconds and 200 years. I was there, first person, in the Sydney Olympic Stadium on that cool evening, September 25th, 2000. Me and 112,000 others watching this one slight girl carry the hopes of an entire nation. I so wanted to feel what others were feeling, but something inside of me felt so empty. I knew for a fact that there was the same aching in Kathy's own soul, the same feeling of being Australian, yet knowing the full cost of that allegiance. We've never talked about it. We had no need. It is something we share, Aboriginal people, an unspoken bond, the memories of lives on the outside looking in. This moment was bigger than sport. It was about history, about healing, about reconciliation. But no, I wanted Kathy to run for all of our people who had never had the chance, for all of those who were still outside looking in. As she took her victory lap, Kathy ran with two flags, the Australian flag with its debt to Britain and the red, black and yellow Aboriginal flag that honours the earth and the sun and the people. And there in that moment I could let go. I could be Australian and stand with other Australians. But you cannot erase 2 centuries in 49.11 seconds. When Kathy Freeman stood smiling on the medal dais, an Aboriginal expo outside the stadium told the story of the ongoing battle for justice. Okay, skim through the next one. B. Just look at the plethora of heroes in movies these days, and you can see how much we all love heroes. What makes certain people take heroic actions in the face of danger? I don't feel like I did something spectacular. I just saw someone who needed help. I did what I felt was right. Wesley Autry told US journalists after an incident in which he rescued a man who had fallen onto a train track. Okay, we remember there's some reference to an ordinary person doing something heroic. It might be that. True heroism is remarkably sober, very undramatic. It's not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost, said Arthur Ashe, a professional tennis player. According to the Heroic Imagination Project, a non-profit organisation that focuses on teaching people, to become heroes in their everyday lives, heroism involves a behaviour or an action on behalf of another person or for a moral cause. Extract C. These days, many people look up to celebrities. There was reference to that, or to who we look up to, like actors, sports stars, or musicians as their heroes and role models. We now have a means to follow their lives and thoughts on social media, and this is serious. In fact, to my mind, one of the most horrific developments of our century has been the widespread acceptance of the notion that if someone is good at acting or sports or pop music, that this means the rest of us should listen to their opinions on climate change or politics. Okay, so that's questioning why we look up to some people as heroes or not. If I hear an actor critiquing a film or a play or telling me why a certain script is a work of genius, of course I'm interested. I might learn something. As it happens, I care about animal rights, but I'm not sure why I'm supposed to find the plight of animals any more or less poignant just because a movie star has given them a voice. Okay, there's sarcasm here, and I remember a reference to sarcasm. Of course, many of these stars would say that I'm terribly mean-spirited and that they're just getting the message out to the public who lack awareness, that they're using their platforms to do some sort of good. And I sort of get this, but I don't really buy it. Okay, so let's just remember sarcasm here. Next, extract D. I loved the Thundercats superheroes cartoon as a child, watching cat-like humanoids fighting the forces of evil. Whenever their leader was in trouble, he'd unleash a sword of omens to gain sight beyond sight, the ability to see events happening in faraway places. Or bellow, thunder, 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 Thundercats, who? To instantaneously summon his allies to his location. What kid didn't want those superpowers? A few months ago, my childhood dreams were at once destroyed and fulfilled. Standing in a line, I noticed that everyone was focused on their smartphone screens. Suddenly it hit me. I already had a Sword of Omens superpowers. With my smartphone, I can see video of faraway events and text my friends to meet up. Billions of people now have what used to be considered superpowers. The physical superpowers may not be too far behind. I'm working on them in the Centre for Rehabilitation, Engineering and Assistive Technology at Vanderbilt University. Okay, remember there was reference to a researcher? Probably, maybe, comes from here. Humanity has begun to enter the age of wearable exoskeletons and exosuits that offer support and strength to the bodies of those who have been weakened. Okay, so those are our 4 extracts. Obviously, me reading them out loud takes a lot longer than it does to skim and scan or read through quickly in your mind. So it wouldn't take that long when you're doing it as a silent reading task, which obviously you are in the test. So let's go, first one. Which writer is a research scientist? Oh, it's great that we just read that. I believe that the writer that is a research scientist is from extract D, because the writer states that they are working at the Centre of Rehabilitation for Engineering and Assistive Technology. So this really strongly suggests that they are a research scientist. Let's pencil in D, 21D. Next one. Which writer gives an indication that they know the hero mentioned? Okay, it's in here, I think, extract A, because it says, we never talked about it. We had no need. So the writer refers to the subject actually here also as just Kathy rather than Kathy Freeman, which suggests a real familiarity that they might know each other. And of course, it also states that we never talked about it. We had no need, which tells us that they do know each other personally. Okay, so that's 22, and let's put A. Next one. Which writer is of the opinion that we are wrong to see certain people as heroes? All right, so I think that we can come to extract C for this one, back to our sarcasm, because the writer actually states here that one of the most horrific developments of this century is the widespread acceptance of the notion that just because someone is good at acting, the rest of us should listen to their opinions on, an expertise that they don't actually have, maybe climate change or politics. So that is the argument, the main argument, in fact, of this whole extract. So I think we can safely say that writer thinks we should not see those people as heroes in those contexts, at least. Next one. Which writer refers to a heroic act to illustrate a particular interpretation? We can take reference here from Wesley Autry, who illustrates heroism through the retelling of that incident where he rescued a man who had fallen onto the train tracks. Okay, so that is a heroic act that illustrates heroism. Also, throughout this extract, it gives some definitions of what true heroism actually is. That it is remarkably sober, that it is undramatic, that it is to serve others at whatever cost, that it is a behavior or an action on behalf of another person or a moral cause that happens in everyday life. So, there's a lot here to illustrate their particular interpretation of what heroism is. So that one is B. Okay, next one here. Which writer observes a connection between a past hero and our human capabilities today? The past hero referred to is from this extract here, D. The writer describes like an epiphany that they had when reflecting on the historical cartoon The Thundercats. So the sight beyond sight reference here, which is the ability to see events happening in a faraway place. So the connection here is suddenly it hit me. Suddenly it hit me. I already had a sort of omen superpowers with my smartphone. I can see video of faraway events and text my friends to meet up, and billions of people now have what we used to actually consider superpowers. So there it is from that point onwards. We can say that they have observed a connection between a past hero and the human capabilities with technology that we have today. Which writer mentions something a hero does which suddenly lightens the writer's mood? Okay, so did we see a sudden change in mood? I think we can come here to extract A. So when the writer here is referring to Cathy Freeman winning the race and that she ran with 2 flags, all of the experience up till here was very heavy and, somewhat, and rightly so, depressing. Some of that information about the horrific history of Aboriginal experience in Australia. Now, there is a turning point though, and it's here. In that moment, I could let go. I could be Australian and stand with other Australians. Cathy ran with 2 flags. The Australian flag with a debt to Britain, and then the red, black and yellow Aboriginal flag that honours the earth and the sun and the people. And there in that moment, I could let go. I could be Australian and stand with other Australians. So after that turning point, yes, I think we do see a shift in the mood there, or a lightening of the mood. So let's pencil in 26A. Which writer refers to an attempt to help ordinary people act in a more selfless way? Okay, well, I think this comes from the Imagination Project that say they were teaching people how to do that. So let's go back to extract B. Here it is. According to the Heroic Imagination Project, a non-profit organisation that focuses on teaching people to become heroes in their everyday lives. Heroism involves a behaviour or an action. Yeah, so they're teaching people really here. It's an attempt to help ordinary people act in a more heroic or a more selfless way. So let's pencil there 27 as B. Next, which writer uses mocking humour when giving a view about today's heroes? Really only one of these texts used humour, and we wrote here sarcasm to remind ourselves. I think it's from this passage where they state, I might learn something. As it happens, I do care about animal rights, but I'm not sure why I'm supposed to find the plight of animals more or less poignant just because a movie star has given them a voice. Okay, so there's a bit of mockery happening there. We can pencil C in for that, 28C. Which writer invites the readers to think about a common example of society putting great value on heroes? Okay, so that's got to be, I think, here at the beginning of extract B. Just look at the plethora of heroes in movies these days and you can see how much we all love heroes. What makes certain people take heroic actions in the face of great danger, etc., etc. So that's really an invitation because they're asking us to just look at the plethora of heroes that there are these days. So that's an example of the way society puts a lot of value on types of heroes. And then we have this last one. Which writer provides a detail which is a reminder of the hero's wider struggle? Okay, well the extract here that really discusses a very serious and wider struggle is extract A. So the writer's message includes references to the wider challenges facing reconciliation in Australia. And there's some moments here in the text like this one, which states, this moment was much bigger than sport. It was about history. It was about healing. It was about reconciliation. Okay, you can't erase 2 centuries in 49.11 seconds. And down here, when Cathy Freeman stood smiling on the medal dais, an Aboriginal expert outside the stadium told the story of an ongoing battle for justice. All right, so that's a big theme. And I think we can say that that is the example of the wider struggle there. Okay, so we can see the best way to approach this matching section is to skim and scan through each of the extracts, get the main ideas out, highlight the key words and phrases along the way, do the same thing with the questions, and then go back and check for detail, dive deeper into each one of the texts to make sure that you can evidence your first instincts, which are often correct, but it is so important to go and check that we're not being misled or tricked, by something that looks similar. So we need to find the evidence to prove each one of those. The topic sentences, the concluding sentences are good places to start to gauge which sentence you should match. However, looking for that detail after the fact is the best way to go and match up the right sentence with the right passage.